Hey guys, and welcome back to Discussion Salon. If you don't know me, my name is Paul and this is a new video. So today we're going to talk about the real Peaky Blinders. We'll talk about the crime, the myth and the truth behind the legends. So the name Peaky Blinders has become iconic. For many it conjures up images of Thomas Shelby in his flat cap, cigarette in mouth, and walking the post-World War I streets of Birmingham with ruthless pose and cold calculation. But while the TV series has captured the imagination of millions worldwide, the reality behind the name is far more tangled and very much less romantic. So, who were the real Peaky Blinders and where did they come from? And how closely does the myth portrayed on screen reflect the actual criminals who once ruled the streets of Britain's industrial heartland? Well, to begin understanding the world, we must turn back the clock. Not to 1919, as the TV series begins, but to 1880s and 1890s, where Birmingham was growing dramatic change and chaotic change too. So as Britain's streets grew rapidly through the rise of the Industrial Revolution in the late 19th century, millions of working classes families migrated to places like Birmingham, Manchester and London in search of opportunity and search for employment. But with industrial growth became overcrowded slums, chronic unemployment and deepening poverty. Communities became tight-knit, but they were tense. They were packed with unsanitary housing and driven into a bit of social competition. These conditions were a fertile breeding ground for gangs, and particularly among the young, the poor and the angry. In Birmingham, these gangs were originally known as sloggers, a slang term drawn from boxing, meaning a heavy-hitting fighter. These slogging gangs were violent, territorial and organised primarily along neighbourhood lines. They fought each other in brutal street brawls and clashed with the police. And then at some point in the 1890s, a new name began appearing in police reports and newspaper headlines, and they were called the Peaky Blinders. The earliest documented activity appeared in the Birmingham Mail on the 24th of March 1890. A report of a brutal assault. A young man named George Eastwood had entered a public house for a ginger beer, only to be set upon by a group of young men, identified as the press as the Peaky Blinders. The attack was vicious, but it wouldn't be the last one. Over 2 decades, the Peaky Blinders, or various gangs using that name, would dominate large swathes of Birmingham's criminal underworld. But it's important to note that the term Peaky Blinder didn't describe one single gang. It became a generic label applied to many young street folks across the city, much like later generations would speak of with the rise of the mods, the skinheads, or chads, or if you're from Scotland, Neds. So where did the name come from? Well, the romantic legend made famous by the TV show that the Peaky Blinders sold razor blades onto their caps and used them as weapons, slashing at the eyes and faces of their enemies. This is a powerful TV image, but almost certainly a myth. Razor blades were only introduced in Britain in 1908 and they were an expensive novelty item at the time. Carl Chin, a Birmingham historian and expert on the gang, has debunked this idea, pointing out that it's unlikely young slum dealers and could afford such luxuries. More plausibly, the name referred to a distinctive style. Peaky referred to the flat cap's stiffened peak, while blinder was a local slang for someone with striking or stylish appearance. Indeed, fashion was a major part of the gang's identity. The Peaky Blinders dressed to intimidate and to impress. They wore tailored jackets, silk scarves, starched collars, bell-bottom trousers, and heavy leather boots. Their peak caps were often tilted low over one eye, a look that both concealed their faces and gave them a threatening silhouette. One newspaper article from the time mentioned the curious fashion of enormous bell-bottoms to their trousers, marking them out instantly on the street. Their dress code wasn't just about pride, it was a performance and a uniform of power. Then there were the weapons. The razors in the hat story may be untrue, but the blinders were undoubtedly armed and dangerous. Police reports and newspaper clippings describe the use of belt buckles, knives, metal-tipped boots, fire irons and even clubs. One Peaky Blinder arrested in Smethwick was found wearing a belt decorated with 50 war medals and regimental badges, stolen from veterans. This was a grotesque and almost mocking display of bravado. Their violence wasn't reserved for local gangs. They terrorised civilians, assaulted police officers, even targeted war veterans and the elderly. Officers described arresting Peaky Blinders as dangerous work. The police station floor, as one officer remarked, would often be swimming of blood. Okay, so before we continue, if you're enjoying this journey into the darker corners of British history or even world history, world history and crime, and want to help us keep on digging deeper, consider supporting the discussion salon on Patreon. Your support will help this channel grow, and I don't give nothing for nothing in this world, so if more people join, there is a chance of winning something there too. So join us now at our channel's Patreon and be part of the telling of stories that history taught to bury. Now, let's get back to the Peaky Blinders. The gang wasn't a tightly run operation like the Shelby family of fiction. It was more of a collection of affiliated street crews who share a name, a style and a reputation. They operated primarily out of Small Heath, Cheapside, Aston and the Shells, but similar gangs appeared across the Midlands. At the heart of their rise was not just violence but bribery and corruption. They paid off police, court clerks and even local politicians. Their influence ran so deep that law enforcement struggled to maintain order. One attempt to curb their activities came in 1899 when Irish Police Chief Sir Charles Rafter was brought in to clean up Birmingham. He had some success, but by then the gang's influence was already waning. One notorious incident came in October 1898 when a young man, calling himself Frank Jones, a self-identified Peaky Blinder, was arrested for the brutal death of Mary Ann Alban, a street seller from Latimer Street. His real name was Claude Felix Mumby, alongside his accomplice, James Twitty. He was later convicted and sentenced to death, but the sentence was later commuted to life in prison, while Twitty, whose real name was George Webb, who had a long criminal history, he was certified insane and he eventually died at Broadmoor Asylum in 1948. By the early 1900s, the Peaky Blinders' grip on the city was slipping. The Great War proved to be the final nail in the coffin. Many gang members enlisted, some willingly, others not. For those who survived and returned, they were changed, they were traumatized or even far too old to continue their ways. Youth clubs, stricter policing and a change of society helped to dismantle the gang's hold. In their place rose a new breed of criminal organisation. This one was more structured and more business-minded. Chief among them were the Birmingham Boys, and these were led by Billy Kimber, a real historical figure, even though quite different from the way he was shown in the Peaky Blinders TV series. He built a violent protection racket centred on horse races, using intimidation and bribery to dominate gambling interests across England. He would later move to the south coast, abandoning his first family in Birmingham to live in wealth with his second wife and children. This fact still angers descendants of his family today. By the 1920s, when the Peaky Blinders series was set, the real gang had all but vanished. In Cole Chin's words, there were no Peaky Blinders in Birmingham in the 1920s. Some of the men who had been Peaky Blinders are either dead or returned from war as changed, aging men. That doesn't mean the show's got no historical value. Peaky Blinders has captured the atmosphere of post-war Birmingham. It's captured the tension, the corruption and the struggle between the classes, and even rise of political extremism. It incorporates real figures like Billy Kimber, Winston Churchill and Oswald Mosley, blended fact with fiction into a compelling narrative. But it must be understood as what it is. It is a TV drama. This is not a documentary. As Carl Chin warns, the glamorization of gangs like the Peaky Blinders risks romanticizing real and violent criminals. The reality, he says, was vicious, foul and horrible men who preyed upon the weak, the poor, attacked policemen, beat their wives. Even Cole's own great-grandfather was a Peaky Blinder. He had a criminal record, a history of domestic violence and convictions of knife attacks. It's not something to be proud of, says Chin, but it's part of his heritage. And if I'm going to write about the misdeeds of others, I must write about my own ancestors. Today, Peaky Blinders has achieved cult status. It's inspired fashions, festivals, escape rooms, even bars. It's become a brand now and a lifestyle. A simple rebellion wrapped up in tailored tweed, and behind the image lies a grittier truth. A story of poverty, violence and survival in one of Britain's toughest cities. So the next time you see a man in a flat cap with a razor-sharp stare, remember this. The real Peaky Blinders didn't leave a legacy of honour or power. They left blood on the cobbles, fear in the neighbours' hearts. They were not kings, they were not rebels. They were gangsters, real ones, and they're far less glamorous than the TV show. Now we want to hear from you. Have you heard of the real Peaky Blinders before watching this video? Do you think the TV series glamorises gang violence or just great storytelling? Would you have survived on the streets of Victorian Birmingham? And should historical dramas stick closer to the truth? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And also tell us what infamous historical crime you'd like for us to cover next. You can have the Whitechapel murders, the Blackout Ripper, or Brides in the Bath case. So hit that bell, subscribe to Discussion Salon, and join us into a deep dive into history's darkest corners. And I wish you all a good night.